There we go. Okay, good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me? Yep, I've got a thumbs up. Excellent. Okay, time's now 10 o'clock, and I'll resume this inquiry, which is into an appeal made by Dido Properties Limited against Buckinghamshire Council's decision to refuse planning permission for production space and supporting buildings for screen-based media and associated services and industries at land adjacent to the A4155, Marlow Road and Westhorpe Farm Lane, Marlow. If there is anyone new today, I don't think there is, but for the benefit of live streamers, my name's Kate MacDonald. I'm a Chartered Town Planner and Planning Inspector, and I'm appointed by the Secretary of State to hold this inquiry. This is the sixth day of the inquiry. Usual reminders, please. Mobile phones, other electronic devices, switch to silent. We'll break for lunch in the region of around 1 p.m. and we'll have suitable mid-morning and mid-afternoon comfort breaks. There's no fire drills planned, so if you do hear the alarm, please exit via the fire exit and assemble assemble at the riverside. Toilets are down that corridor on my right, your left, and the accessible toilet's just up there. Up to yet, I've had heard opening statements from the main parties. I've heard landscape evidence. I've heard from interested parties. I've heard evidence from the from the appellant's master planner and scheme designer, and have heard evidence from the Rule 6 party on character of the area and local residential amenity. I've also done the site visit or part of the site visit. Today we're going to do two roundtable sessions which are on the topics of ecology and noise, and then we'll hear from the Rule 6 witness for Pinewood, which is on the subject of Pinewood Studios. Any procedural or housekeeping matters? Thank you. So who will take part for the ecology roundtable, please, for the council? Mr. Fannon? Yep. Rule 6 party? Crabtree? Yep. Okay. Appellant?
That will be Mr. Bob Edmonds.
Mr. Edmonds.
To my left.
I haven't met you before. Hello. Nice to meet you, Mr. Edmonds. And for I should have Wild Marlow. I've got Miss West. Yep. And who Bucksbirds Club, Mr. Seekins. Correct. Yeah, and who else have I got there? Sarah, what, sorry? Sarah Foote. Thank you. And are you Mrs. And Miss West, you're Mrs. Sorry, you're Mrs. West. Mrs. West and Mrs. Foote. Okay, excellent. Right, okay, thank you. So what the normal procedure is, it's I'll ask questions, so answers through me. And if you've got something you want to say, just wait until the person who's speaking has said it, and appellant gets the last word because it's their appeal. So that's the procedure, and that's how we'll run it. Okay. Right, so I did a small agenda. I don't have a lot of questions on ecology, but if there's something you think I've missed or I'm moving on too soon, let me know. We'll have a mop-up question at the end. So on the ecology statement of common ground, it's agreed between the council and the Rule 6 that there is no effect on any European sites. The committee report refers to the shadow HRA, and then the committee report also did its own habitats regulation assessment as well, and an appropriate assessment. I asked a few last week about CD9, that it had appendices that were missing. That was the updated planning statement. It was CD 930. Oh, sorry, no, it wasn't. It was CD 2035. And Appendix 8 had a shadow HRA in it, but I mentioned it last week, but it's not been updated online. I don't know if anyone's managed to find that. It's not essential because it's a shadow HRA and the council have done their own appropriate assessment, and I would have to do one as well. So I'm just looking to understand where it is.
We'll pick that up, madam, and find that. You mentioned an agenda. I don't know whether...
Oh, have you not got the agendas?
We've not got the agendas. I don't know whether anybody else has.
Harvey has them because I spoke to him this morning and he said he'd got them. So I think he's uploaded them, but I thought he'd sent them round. I thought they'd been sent round as well from Holly, but they must not have been sent round.
We did get them.
You've got them?
Yes, 8 o'clock this morning, or 8:08. There was an email that went to planning.wyc at Bucks, but that might not have been forwarded to.
May not have been filtered through. Okay. The agenda. Should we pause for a moment? Yeah, he said he'd done a separate folder.
Okay.
It's not a big agenda. The first topic was HRA. So someone's going to find this Appendix 8 for me, please.
Just get can I get the core document reference?
Yeah, CD 2035. So it's a planning statement update, or it was an addendum, I think, to the planning.
Yeah.
And it had a shadow HRA in it, and that's what's referred to in the committee report. But I just can't find. It just says Appendix 8, and then it's a blank page, and Appendix 9, and it's a blank page. It's like the appendices have dropped off it.
Mr. Edmonds.
Mr. Edmonds, so I think this document you're referring to is CD 2043, which is
Oh.
Appendix 8, addendum for planning statement,
Hang on.
shadow HRA. So 043.
It's 04. So I've given you the wrong core document number. I do apologise. I thought I was on the right one.
I think Mr. Edmonds has found the document that is the one that was supposed to be appended to CD 2035.
Right. Okay.
This is Appendix 8, which is the HRA technical note, which is referred.
Right. Okay. So the appendix referred to in 020. So my core document reference was right.
It was right, yeah.
But okay, I was thinking, have I got that wrong?
No,
But the Appendix 8 is where? Sorry.
CD 2043.
Oh, they follow on afterwards.
That's the HRA technical note there.
Okay. Right. Got you. Right. Okay. Thank you. Right. That's helpful. Okay. That was just clarity for me. And that's the most up-to-date shadow HRA that the appellants have carried out.
Yes, it is.
And the council's most up-to-date HRA appropriate assessment is the one in the committee report. Yeah. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure that they were all up to date, and that was what I had. ID 10, which is the email trail from Natural England, that confirms they're happy with the Spade Sang as the offsetting for the BNG for the housing sites. That's all agreed, isn't it? And that's what's agreed in the statement of common ground as well now. Yeah. Okay. And then just the calling about the Sang for the council, that decision, that's tomorrow, is it? The committee meeting?
Yes, 10 a.m. tomorrow. Yeah.
So you'll be able to update me
That's
afterwards.
ID 37 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it might not be ID 37, but it is, yeah.
Okay.
Madam, just briefly while I think of it, the ecology statement of common ground, I think you were provided with a hard copy yesterday of the updated version.
Yes.
That was unsigned. I think the first thing is we can get a signed version over to you at some point today, so just for formalities. And the second thing is if that can be uploaded to the website, because I'm not sure that the third parties are aware. They're looking at me slightly blankly that there is a statement of common ground on ecology, which was updated yesterday. So what we'll do is we can, if possible, get some hard copies of that printed, but certainly get it uploaded to the website so that they've got that. I probably can't send it to you directly, but I can certainly, perhaps someone from the council could send it to Mr. C.
Yeah, I can.
You can send it up.
Yeah.
It's it updates the position that was agreed earlier last week. So the council have withdrawn reason for refusal 8, and that was in
Mr. Fannon's
Mr. Fannon's rebuttal proof. So that it was before the inquiry opened. That was clear. But I asked for an updated statement of common ground for ecology just to clarify matters as a combined statement from the council and the appellant. So the position hasn't changed since before the inquiry. It's just that the ecology statement of common ground sets out that agreement.
And it's largely similar to the version that was previously agreed, that there's not much that changes. It's really just towards the end where there's some discussion about reason for refusal 8, if that assists in terms of getting yourself up to speed with the document.
So, yeah, 315 to 320. And then there's an additional paragraph at 329 on BNG.
Yeah, okay. I've nothing further on HRA and reason for refusal 8 in terms of how that's all working. Does anybody else have anything to raise on that?
Perhaps if we give them a minute.
Yeah,
to
that's
get
absolutely
up to date
fine,
with
yeah.
the document.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you. Squidge. In relation to reason for refusal 8, which is to do with the offsetting for the housing sites. Yeah, yeah, of course, yeah.
I just wanted to clarify who we are and why we're here and in what capacity, just to avoid any confusion if that's permitted, ma'am.
Of course.
We are here as volunteers today for representing Wild Marlow, a local volunteer charity. We do have ecological backgrounds as professional ecological consultants. But today, last week, I had my residence hat on, and today we have our volunteers hat on. So just to clarify who we are and why we're here. It's also been incredibly challenging, as I'm sure you can appreciate, trawling through the thousands of documents. As
I definitely appreciate.
And trying to filter out what's relevant, what's not, and what have you. So please bear with us on this. It's not a scenario that we're familiar with. So please forgive us if we stumble, but we will do our absolute best. The issue with the SLANG provision that was put to the council, and the reason for the call-in, whilst Cabinet decided on 2nd of January, wasn't it, that they considered it appropriate, it was our understanding that it's not, from an ecological impact point of view. We made our comments clear in time for that meeting.
Sorry, when you say it's not appropriate, what's not appropriate from a SANG point of view, just so I've got a full understanding?
The proposals that they put forward would have such a harmful impact on the ecology in the area.
The proposals for the film studios? No,
for
okay, for the SANG, right,
the
okay.
alternative SANG.
Right.
So we made our comments felt, and one of the reasons for the call-in is that proper consultation wasn't carried out. There wasn't a huge amount of time or public awareness of it, and I believe that whilst they agreed in principle, it's subject to a planning application anyway, so it's far from resolved and far from considered accepted in our understanding of it.
Okay.
And our concerns for the ecology side of it is that SANG provision must have has a recreation need. It has criteria that it needs to meet, for example, allowing public onto the land, and therefore we see a conflict with the area that is for SANG provision if it's also being used for mitigation and compensation of land lost for the film studio because of human disturbance from, for example, dog walkers, and then, you know, it's also mitigation for skylark and foraging for barn owls. So we feel there's a conflict between the use for public and the ecology that is being proposed on that area.
Okay.
North Spade Oak.
I think there may be some confusion here about which parts of land we're talking about. So from my understanding, and I'm sure the council or the appellants will correct me if I'm wrong, the council have set aside land that's in their land ownership that will act as a SANG that's agreed with Natural England and will offer all their purposes for what a SANG should be in terms of recreational offsetting, so people don't go and visit the areas that are protected. That's agreed with Natural England, that's council ownership, that's what's subject to the committee decision, and now for tomorrow for the review. The area of land that the appellants offered up was badged up as alternative sang. The council don't agree with that. That's one of my next questions. But that's not part of the council's sang provision, which addresses reason for refusal in terms of the offsetting for the housing. Is that right? Have I got that right?
Doesn't the proposal that was put forward in January by the council, I think, is directly adjacent to the BNG
BNG
site.
offsetting.
Yeah, and so there is a conflict because of the proximity, and there was a question raised by Councillor Wilson, I believe, who was responsible for the calling and recruiting 23 other councillors, I think, with regards to whether the council had a formal agreement from the appellant with regards to whether that sang would be viable. It's all a bit up in the air and uncertain.
Okay,
So
understood.
that's our concern, is that what was put forward, we believe, is not acceptable from an ecological point of view for that site, because it's such a sensitive site, and one of the footpaths goes through, you know, the protected species area of ground nesting birds. So off-lead dogs isn't suitable, but I believe it's too uncertain and for it to be said that it's been decided.
Okay. Can I go to Mr. Fannon first, and then I'll go to the appellant for clarity or explanation on that, just for me and for Wild Milo.
You've outlined the position quite accurately. The appellant's BNG land was promoted as a joint BNG sang at one point, but that's not accepted by the council. And the council's alternative BNG that we've identified that's subject to the call-in consideration tomorrow is adjacent land, adjacent to Spade Oak. Now there is some, if you like, relationship. There is a public right of way in the BNG land which would be used as part of the sang routing, but none of the BNG land is required. So there's a distinction between what the appellant is offering as BNG and the council's proposal for an alternative sang. They're not the same.
But the public right of way is on the BNG and is included in part of the sang.
That's correct. But all it says that it is a public right of way. It doesn't change. It's utilised as part of the sang walking route.
Okay, I understand that. Anything from the appellants, Mr. Evans?
So I agree with what Mr. Fannon has stated in terms of the position between the appellant and the council. The only thing I would add is that there is there will be an opportunity to cover the management, through the ecological design statement, which will come through a condition. Then there's the opportunity to make sure that the management requirements for the BNG land and any increased pressure from recreation pressure can be dealt with through appropriate management, and through that way.
Yeah, I'll come on to that when we talk about BNG in a short while. Yeah.
Just one other point to make. Well, actually 2 points. Firstly, in relation to the previous offer of sang in relation to BNG land, just for context, the reason that was being considered at one stage was because of the existence of reason for refusal 8, that the appellant was thinking about some alternative options, but obviously that's no longer necessary given where we are. And the second point to make is Wild Milo referred to the fact that there's going to need to be a planning application for Hollands Farm in due course, which is what the sang is actually offsetting. And the appellant agrees with that and actually considers that to be something that supports the appellant's position, because of course that will be the appropriate forum for the final details of the management of the sang to be resolved. It's not a matter for this appeal for those details to be addressed. They will be dealt with further down the line. And that's not to say that we're trying to brush them under the carpet or say that it's not our problem. It's just that there is going to be that separate process for that to be dealt with.
Understood. Thank you. Councillor Crabtree.
Hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to provide an update from Little Marlow Parish Council, who had a meeting last night and resolved that the Parish Council will be making representation to Buckinghamshire Council in terms of the fact that we've been properly consulted about the decision that was taken on the 2nd of January. So I presume that will be part of the feedback that you get from the meeting tomorrow.
Understood. Thank you. And yes,
On consultation, you may have seen this already, but in ID 37, which is the council's officer report to the committee that's being considered tomorrow, paragraph 3.1 of the report, it makes it clear that the papers for the 2nd of January cabinet decision meeting were published 5 working days in advance in accordance with the council's constitution. And then representations that were submitted, including late representations, were considered by cabinet. So that's what that report says about consultation.
May I ask another question for clarification?
Yes.
Please. So originally, with BE2, the condition was for an alternative SANG provision in the Little Marlow Lakes Country Park area, which is the whole area, including the appellant's the appeal site. If after the call in and after the planning permission for the SANG isn't given approval because it's deemed not suitable for people and wildlife and doesn't meet the right criteria, how are the options for an alternative SANG then going to be achieved if the film studio has removed another huge area from what would be considered acceptable to meet the conditions for the alternative SANG provision?
Mr. Fannon, any comments?
I can't really speculate. Clearly, they, we'll understand the position more clearly after the call-in meeting tomorrow. And there still would be sort of an obligation to identify a SANG to support the Holland Farm allocation. All I can say is that the issue wouldn't go away, but I'm not really in a position to speculate what the outcome will be.
I would respectfully agree with Mr. Fannon. I think it's difficult at this stage to predict. Obviously, one of the possible outcomes of tomorrow, and again, this is speculation, is that it will be felt that there needed to be further consultation. And so obviously that's a procedural issue, not going to the substance of the decision. And it may be that consultation ultimately results in the same outcome being achieved. So I think it's very difficult to say at the moment. Obviously, the appellant has all of their arguments that they made in the statement of case about reason for refusal 8 anyway, which they would fall back on in the alternative.
I think for me, if it would be difficult to predict exactly what's going to happen, and we'll be updated tomorrow and take it from there in terms of any further evidence that needs to be heard on the topic.
Thank you.
Right. My next topic was alternative SANG provision. It's really just a one question. Obviously, the appellant claimed that they've provided an alternative SANG. The LPA said it's not an alternative SANG because of X, Y, and Z. Does it actually make a difference now where we stand with terms of reason for refusal 8 being withdrawn?
It's been taken out of the section 106. It's not on offer anymore.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter.
Not even.
It's a moot point.
Moot point. That's what I thought.
Just for clarity, clearly, as it's been taken out of the equation, it wouldn't be a factor in the planning balance in the wage.
Okay. That was what I was expecting to hear, but I just wanted confirmations. Okay.
I've agreed that.
Yes. Thank you. Right, so there's then moving on to the biodiversity net gain for the site. 20% of BNG's proposed. I've seen comments from various people about how it'll work, how it won't work. Mr. Evans, you've covered most of them in your rebuttal, to be honest. But I just wanted to know if there was anything else that you wanted to add that I might need.
So my hope is that I've covered it all sufficiently in the rebuttal. The 20% BNG net gain is on offer, and that's going to be secured through the Section 106 agreement, which is now drafted. And so as far as we know, the BNG commitment is made, and it can be secured by legal agreement, and is all covered and done in accordance with good practice.
Yeah. Okay. just in terms of, I know that there's been, I think you've covered everything that I've seen in terms of rebutting comments from everybody else, but one of the ones that sort of stands out is how it'll be monitored effectively and how you make sure that net gain is achieved. And I know that's a concern for wild marlow and the Rule 6 parties and probably Bucks birds as well. So I know it's in the 106, but is there anything further you want to say on that?
So bluntly, long-term monitoring is one of the major concerns of implementing the BNG policy nationally, and it's only just come in. Of course, the appellant has made the commitments to a long-term monitoring plan, which would be submitted at pre-commencement stage, so the council can review it and agree that. And I believe there's also a financial consideration to allow Buckinghamshire to look and to check that monitoring is in place. So that seems to be robust to me.
I can probably chip in.
Yes, please.
My name's Stuart Andrews.
Oh, hello, send your name on email.
Yeah, from Evershed Southern, I'm instructing solicitor to the appellant team. The 106 includes a monitoring contribution for long-term monitoring and management, which has been agreed with the authority. The only amendment really to the 106 agreement that might, well, two potential amendments to the 106 agreement that might come out of the discussion on Friday. Well, the first one's agreed, which is the metric needs to be updated to align with the statement of common ground. And the second is whether we take elements of the condition and put that into the 106 or we leave it separately as a condition. So there's a discussion as to that, but in all other respects, the provisions relating to BNG and the 106 are effectively settled between us.
And I'll go to Mr. Seekins first, because you just put your hand up.
That's Richard Seekins, Buckinghamshire Bird Club. We feel there's no biodiversity net gain. We like your report on the existing site, but we're giving over the North Fields to people and dogs, if that's what a SAN or the area you're claiming to BNG is. That's going to destroy any hope of bird life or wildlife in that area. So I guess something's got to give, because we're a big country, or too many people in this country. There's not enough wild space. We're about to build on more wild space, possibly. And what are you doing? Shoving people into an area of outstanding natural wildlife. Although, of course, I acknowledge in the formality of a local government, it's not acknowledged as being the great site that it is. We've managed it for 50 years. When the council took ownership, we've managed it in spite of the council. Guess what? The council put the head of development, who loves the film studios, in charge of that area. He doesn't care about the area. But no, the government, the local council had no one else to put in there. So we see it as a biodiversity net loss. We accept if this has got to go ahead, that's what's going to happen. And you must not destroy the spit or the area of birding. You can let people walk around. Although it's muddy and lovely and unkempt at the moment, of course, the council will have to put paths in, because that's what you do if you want a SAN. I'm still confused about SAN. If Holland Farm Development is going to get a SAN and the film studios want a SAN, what are you doing? You're putting a basement SAN in for the film studio and a ground level SAN for Holland Development. So that's our input.
Mr. Evans, do you want to come back on that, please? Just for my understanding and for the
It might be worth just referring to one of some of the drawings that have been submitted. So I'll just refer you to CD2086, which is the figure accompanying the overview of ecological enhancements. CD2086B
I was about to say,
takes you to, and I'm actually going to refer to B and to figure D as well, which gives a bit more detail on the bird mitigation in that area. Yeah.
We've got the off-site land for BNG delivery. That shows the.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. So the first comment I wanted to make is the area of off-site BNG provision is currently arable land, and the proposal is to create is for that to be created into neutral grassland, managed in a way to attract and to be beneficial for birds such as skylark and barn owl, which we know that which will help compensate for the impacts on those particular bird species. It will also benefit other ground nesting birds and birds that will be associated with grassland and scrub habitats. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not interrupting.
Is your mic on? Just checking.
I
It's all right. I can hear you. I'm
It's
just checking
on,
it's
it's
just you up. Yeah.
we can't move too close. Just wanted to make a point that whilst it is arable at the moment, just a few years ago it wasn't. It was what you're proposing to put back in, because when the Star Wars set was built, it was scruffy grassland, which was barn owl foraging habitat, full of skylarks, full of lapwings, and that was literally a few years ago because it got halted for COVID reasons with the filming. So we were concerned when that happened that it was destroying valuable habitat. Star Wars moved out, the grass recovered, it's now been reverted to arable, and all of a sudden the BNG proposal is to put back the grassland that the arables just replaced. So it's funny timing.
I also comment.
Yeah.
Um,
Just on sec.
I imagine within the technicalities of the BNG, the fact that people and dogs are allowed to run riot on that area means it still can be claimed as a BNG. Would that be correct?
So it would still meet the BNG provisions of providing the habitat, but that habitat also has to provide nesting and compensation for skylarks and for foraging barn owls. So it will be the detail of exactly how it will be managed will come forward as part of the pre-commencement commissions.
Which the council hasn't involved us in today.
There's normally consultation on conditions that takes place from my experience. Not that, no, did you not consult on conditions? Discharges? Oh, right, okay.
But we take that away. It's not that we wouldn't consult. I think there's clearly a public interest in it, and I'm sure we can take that away and discuss and make arrangements, appropriate
We're
arrangements.
here ready to be consulted. Have been for the last 10 years and today.
Okay.
So I just have one more point, and that just reflects on the so one of the conditions mentions adaptive management, which is the idea that you set out provisions for how you will manage a piece of land, including its habitats and its species. You monitor against the targets that you set yourself, and if you're achieving them, happy days. If it's not being achieved, then you have to adapt that management in order to achieve what you set out to do at the start. And so this is the gold standard of long-term management and monitoring for these types of schemes.
In green roofs, which is very welcomed for many reasons. One point that was raised and I'd like clarification on is whether those roofs will now still be covered with solar panels as well, which I know was raised as a conflict between green roofs for wildlife and obviously solar panels covering it. So that's one point that we'd like confirmation.
The plans I have show solar and green roofs before me. I don't know if there's a, that's what my understanding.
Inspector, that is the case.
Yeah.
The scheme, it's a detailed planning scheme that includes details of green roofs and solar panels and how they
Full by solar, aren't they?
Yes,
on those lines. Yeah.
so the assessment of the if you like the contribution of the green roofs takes into account the effect of the panels as well on the roofs.
Anything from you, Mr. Edmonds, on that?
No, I think that's correct.
Okay.
And then the other area of on-site enhancement is just sort of raising our
Sorry, just going back, you say that it won't, in terms of having solar and green roofs, that doesn't work for ecology. Is there a reason why?
Conflict.
it can conflict, so it
How?
needs to be so that the solar panels can effectively cover depending on the type of green roof or sedum roof or whatever's choice, it's the actual growing of the plants that are on there, and covering the area that could be used by birds, foraging birds, for example, and whether that's taken into account in the BNG, because it's an area calculation. So it's I don't know in the detail whether that was taken into account, the consideration of the panels.
Mr. Edmonds, do you know?
So it should have been taken into account. And I would have to check the detail because there's quite a lot of detail in the way the metric is put together. So I don't have an answer straight away, I'm afraid.
Okay. Can you get an answer at some point during the inquiry for me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, you were going to make another point.
Yes, sorry, there was just one more thing about the on-site enhancement. It's just a conflict, another sort of type of conflict that may come up is that they're providing open mosaic and previously developed land, which is achievable, but there is a conflict in the visual perception of that type of land can be seen as wasteland, which is also something that has been described, the site has been described as an eyesore, wasteland, but it has a lot of the characteristics which is in all the reports, that is open mosaic on previously developed land. So our concern is that is being used as the BNG on site enhancement and creation, but down the line may not be seen as appropriate or not managed in the right correct way for that condition.
Mr. Edmonds.
So I don't see a conflict with the way that it's been set out in the ecological design statement that's been made at the moment. There is a commitment to create open mosaic habitat. Indeed, it is a challenging habitat to create, but they've set out a good strategy for doing that, and it would be managed in the long term to maintain that habitat. If it ceases to become that habitat, then it would have to fall into the realm of the adaptive management.
Well, I just comment in addition, if it persists. Clause 5.3 of the draft section 106 agreement includes an obligation to establish a liaison group to deal with issues in discharge or any disputes as to the requirements under Schedule 1 of the Section 106 agreement. Schedule 1 is the list of all of the obligations, which includes measures relating to BNG provision. So the capacity is there for local groups to become involved and to have an influence on the way in which those obligations are discharged.
I would say to that, we'd absolutely welcome the opportunity to be part of that liaison group. To date, our interaction with the developers or their team has not been positive, and all our comments and concerns have been largely ignored. So we would welcome the opportunity to have our input be valued and considered. Thank you.
I just make one clarification point just in relation to open mosaic habitat. So part of the reason that it was proposed was because of a concern from the council's ecologist about whether there was open mosaic habitat on the site currently. An experienced ecologist went out to site and has confirmed that there is none of that habitat on the site currently. And
Yeah,
I've also
3.9 in your rebuttal, I think.
3.9 in the rebuttal, and I don't think it is either. So there's a commitment to make it. It's not replacing any open mosaic habitat that is being lost.
I think we would dispute that point.
Okay. I will take that away. Thank you.
Visit the site and have been visiting the site for many, many years, every single day. We are very familiar with it in all seasons, all conditions, all weathers. Yes.
Anything further to raise?
I don't, because we it's a really tricky habitat to define.
Yeah.
I agree. criteria that is difficult work out, but there are elements that were brought up by the council ecologists that show it is that habitat.
Okay, but at the minute, the agreement I've got with the council is that they agree that it with the bird. My teeth back in. They agree that that the open mosaic, the replacement BNG is acceptable for the offsite and what's on site. Okay, right. There we go. Right, okay. I understand. If you think that I'm not asking all questions that I need to, it's because I understand everything. So I don't probably understand everything. But it's not because I'm not going there. It's just because I don't need to go there because I've got what I need. So don't think that I'm not covering everything. So.
And obviously, and forgive us if we're not following proper procedure, but just because things have been agreed doesn't necessarily mean
it's agreed with you.
It's
Yeah.
agreed with
No,
us.
I understand.
So,
yeah.
Whilst we understand that hands are tied when agreements have been made, and with the statement of common ground, for example, we still feel it's really important for these points to be said,
yes,
and made public, so that our concerns are.
No, it is, and that's what I need to do as
Okay.
part of my decision. Is I'm essentially like dispute resolution is how I see my job. So
Oh, it's like a divorce.
Well. But essentially that's it. So I try and take everyone's viewpoints, but I also need to just focus on what
Yes.
I need to focus on in terms to make a decision that doesn't run into thousands of pages as well. So, or a recommendation in this instance. Okay, right. I think the only other thing I had on BNG was just the vehicle crossing, about how that affects biodiversity. And I mentioned in the conditions that there's nothing sort of finalised and how that's worked up. I know that the statements I've got say it won't affect BNG and there's a couple of options, but it was just, I know that's been raised by Wild Marlow and probably the Bird Club as well in terms of how I don't think you've raised the bridge.
I raise it now.
Okay. And I think Little Marlow Parish Council have looked at the bridge as well in terms of how it affects biodiversity. Had you? No. Right. It's just Wild Marlow's comments. I've read them. So any comments on the bridge for that? And that it's obviously the bridge to plot to the back lot, isn't it?
This is the bridge over the watercourse.
Yeah.
Because of short impact.
I think some interested parties have raised it as well. That's where else I've heard it about the swans. Moving on.
Have you seen something in the appellant's work on this as well, or is it more that you're looking for an answer from the appellant for things that are in the
It
statements?
was just considering what's been said
Yeah,
about
okay.
the biodiversity being affected and how it affects movements up and down the river if we put in a bridge in.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the evidence I've got before me says that there's no effect, but it has been raised. So
Yes.
if anything else to comment on that.
I think our concerns with regards to that crossing, and it's an important water course, and within the own surveys that were carried out by the appellants team, what was Barbastelle bats, otters, Nethusia, all sorts of protected species use that corridor, use that water course. And building a road structure with vehicles, high-sided vehicles, I'm assuming, because they're set building vehicles, things like that. That constant travel, light, noise, disruption will be impacting these protected species that specifically use that area, as well as obviously all the water birds that use the connecting waterways to the lakes, the breeding swans, grebes, etc.
Inspector,
Yes.
that is subject to a condition, proposed condition. Clearly, there was a lot of discussion about this very issue. Recognise there's sensitivity there. There is a preliminary design, but it's felt we did need to scrutinise this in a bit more detail. The design was developed, so the condition is proposed to deal with that.
Nothing to add. No. Okay. Anything further on the bridge? Okay, right. Then moving on to anything else on biodiversity net gain before I move on to birds. So there was claims, I know Mr. Seekin said that not all bird species have been recorded, and the sites of a higher value than what's stated in the environmental statement. So I think the Wilkes Birds Club are saying the sites of county value or potentially national. I'm just looking for anything from the appellants in response to that about the fact that the birds haven't all been surveyed.
So I've obviously looked through the detail of the information that's been provided by the third parties, and I recognise, and it is widely recognised, that the wider Little Marlows gravel pit biological notification site is important for birds. The site covers a large area of the local area, quite substantially more than the appeal site, which is our main area of focus. There's quite a lot of information in Councillor Crabtree's initial proof around birds and the number of birds recorded at the site. My understanding of where these bird records are, based on the information that Councillor Crabtree provided, is that they're mostly recorded at the Spade Oak Lake, which is the council-owned part of the council-owned restored gravel pit. This is the area that's been managed most extensively and properly for birds, and that's where most of the records seem to be from. Within the appeal site, there are indeed, there's good baseline data for both breeding birds and wintering birds. I'll allow you to point out if you think there are any bird species that you think that haven't been recorded that are important, but we've picked up and talked already about barn owl and skylark, and a few other of these species that are associated with the habitats that will be created through the BNG off-site land. So by creating, effectively the appeal scheme is going to lose an area of rough neutral grassland, and through the creation of new habitat, we'll be creating new habitat for those important bird species.
Anything to add? Yes.
So I think it's important to point out that whilst most of the recorded species are at Spade Oak Lake, that is because it's a public site and it's relatively well recorded. The area within the appeal site is a private site, so it doesn't have as many visitors, but that's not to say it's not equally, well, maybe it's not quite the jewel in the crown, but it's still pretty shiny and gorgeous within the greater landscape. And the nature of that whole area with the 7 lakes and the connecting watercourses is that it forms connected habitats, and these species are mobile species. So that's a lot of the birds that we see at Westhorpe, at Roach Lake rather, which is the lake within the appeal site that is going to be that is potentially under threat. A lot of the birds that I see there are the same birds that we see at Spade Oak, so they do travel around, and it's important for that to be understood in the wider area, and that's the plot 4 that is next to that particular lake, and plot 5 that is also connected via this bridge. They are the most biodiverse areas that will be impacted by the constant construction of building sets, taking down sets, building new sets, taking down sets, outdoor filming, pyrotechnics, travel, things like that. So yes, the area is not well recorded, put it that way, because it is not open to the public. But that doesn't mean that they're not there, and not all wildlife shows up when the ecologist has an appointment to go and view the site, as we know.
Mr. Seekins.
I'd agree with all that, and your ecology reports are great, good baseline. So when I've been around there, we've seen good stuff. We as locals have discovered other things like long-eared owls, which you'd be very excited about, I know. But the whole thing is, in this country, there is no wild unkempt land. If you see it, It has to be mown, or it has to be farmed, or it's a little patch that farmers are encouraged to put aside. That's a wonderful little patch of unkempt land, and it's going to go if this happens. If that's the case, we don't really want that sort of problem dumped on Little Marlow with this two-tier saying that we're talking about, because people and dogs will just destroy it. However, we're here to mitigate and hold you to account for mitigation and be part of that mitigation to benefit all in the future as best we can.
Understood. Thanks, Mr. Seekins. Anything else? Councillor Crabtree, do you have anything to add on birds? No, you bring it over. Okay.
Would you like me to pick up on that BNG point in relation to green roofs?
Right. Well, yeah, if you've already
Yeah. So
worked it out. I don't know how you've done that unless someone's working in the background.
yeah. So I've just checked. So the definitions for green roofs are set out in the UK Habitat Classification. There are 3 different types of green roofs. There is an extensive green roof, and there is an intensive green roof. An extensive green roof is the kind of lower tier version, and the intensive one has more species on it and has to hit a higher threshold. In the on-site habitat enhancement, so the green roofs that are proposed as part of the development, they are all the extensive green roof type, which in BNG terms has a low distinctiveness. Okay, so this is the sort of lowest score that you can get in BNG for habitat creation. So whilst this is not a complete answer, what I'm saying is there's a relatively low bar to be a green roof to achieve low distinctiveness.
Okay.
And it is perfectly possible to have an extensive green roof with solar panels and still achieve the habitat definition for extensive green roof.
Just to pick up on that point, if I may. So my understanding of you're replacing a habitat of a certain level with a certain units with a habitat with higher units, but it's not necessarily replacing habitat like for like. So you're maybe targeting different species. So whilst it may work out in favour in a metric to achieve the figures, on reality on the ground, it's not helping the actual wildlife species that are losing their habitat and offsetting BNG. For example, if I just take into consideration the barn owl that I see almost every week, I'm lucky enough to go out with the local ringer that monitors the barn owls all in that area. I know where all the boxes are. I know where they nest. I know where they breed. I help ring them. We monitor them. If we remove one habitat and sort of shove them 2 miles away, they're then conflicting for resources with another breeding pair, which is then going to, you know, there's only a finite amount of habitat and resources within a certain area, so it does have a knock-on impact, as you know. So achieving figures in a metric is great, but on the ground it's not always great for the creatures involved.
Mr. Evans.
So the metric is a blunt tool. It's a proxy for habitat. We know that it is better than what we had before, and I think we're in a better position now, just in general policy terms, with BNG than we would have been 5 years ago. And the important thing to realise is that this particular scheme already mitigates and compensates for the impacts of the species and habitats on site through the impact assessment process. What BNG does is offer something on top of that. And this particular scheme is offering 20%, is providing 20% biodiversity net gain. And actually, well, it's not required to provide the statutory even 10%.
No,
they've made that commitment, which is a significant benefit.
Understood. Yeah. Do you understand that BNG point about that the scheme doesn't, because at the time the application came in?
No, yes,
Yeah.
I understand that.
Yeah.
It's part of the I think that what's brought up from the Buckinghamshire Bird Club, which is that the environmental impact assessment was done, and it quite rightly raised that they are district level, the breeding birds. It's the way it went through the environmental impact assessment and has the residual effects, the final residual effects for the operational phase is actually defined as significant beneficial effect at local level, which which the Bird Club would disagree with, that the operational phase of the film studio would actually be of benefit to the birds that were on site. I think that's something that we would not agree with.
You've actually jumped ahead to my next question. So that's
Oh, sorry.
no, that's great. You must have read my mind.
This is also the same for the foraging bats and invertebrates. They've gone from saying that they're of importance at a district level, and then the residual effects are beneficial, which we would question the site that in its current baseline state to what it's going to be like. I don't think will be a benefit to these groups.
Understood. My question was how do you get to a significant beneficial effect? So for the ones that have been quoted as that. So
okay, so this is set out in my rebuttal proof in paragraph 2.5, or at least that covers the general parameters and picks up on the points that you've made around the assessment for birds. So the process of impact assessment is to consider construction impacts first, and then to consider operational impacts separately. And they obviously consider the individual receptors. So we would talk about birds and bats in a separate way. So this is what the impact assessment has done. And it is a difficult position, it's difficult to explain. Effectively, the impact assessment has considered the impacts of the construction on the birds, and through the mitigation that's provided, which is controlled by the construction environmental monitoring plan, will ensure that there won't be significant impacts during construction on those birds. When it comes to operation, then there is a mix of both mitigation and compensation. So measures to reduce the impact, such as sensitive lighting design, and other measures that are in through the operation of the backlot management plan. And then in addition to that mitigation, there is compensation for those bird species provided principally through on-site habitat enhancements and the off-site habitat enhancements that we've discussed at some length already. The ecologist that has done the impact assessment has concluded that with all of those measures brought together, that overall the bird populations will benefit from that management and that compensation.
anything to add?
I think we still stand by a film set with the high frequency, although sometimes low magnitude. I just can't see how they've got to a beneficial effect. I can see that the mitigation and compensation could bring it down to not significant, which is a lot of the residual effects, but from a district level importance in those three groups on a site that has no lighting, no noise like it will have, to have a residual effect that is a benefit.
Thank you. Anything further to add?
Only that some of this will come out in the development of the detailed design strategy and the habitat creation and management plan that will be prepared for the offsite. And as I've already mentioned, it's obvious that the appellant and yourselves are setting the bar high about what is meant to be provided, and through that management plan and through the adaptive management that come out of it, then that scheme and those pieces of land will have to deliver for those species. That's the commitment that's made.
Is that how? I'm concerned how enforceable that is. Call me sceptical.
It's enforceable through a legal agreement,
Yeah.
so that's what the planning obligation would seek to do, and it's signed and agreed by all the parties that are interested in that. Mr. Seekins.
Can I say, as the Bucks Bird Club super sub, unfortunately our ecologist, professional ecologist, couldn't be here, but his point is from past experience, all the promises that come up at this stage of any development are really acted upon.
Understood. Thank you. There was concern being raised about the fact that spade oak wasn't assessed by Bucks Bird Club. You've answered in your rebuttal that you don't think it's necessary because of the distance between. Anything further you want to add on that?
No, I think that point's adequately covered under my rebuttal proof in 2.2, but I'm happy to take any questions on it if you or third parties have anything on that.
No, Mr. Seekins, anything on? I think Bucks Bird Club had raised it, so. I think it's 2.6 I've got here. I might have got it wrong. It was quite late last night.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh. Yeah.
2.6.
Is it a rebuttal we want?
Rebuttal 2.6,
There you
page 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're worried about that, but it's more about the management of a SANG or the BNG, where we're seeing ignorance shown by the council and possibly yourself. So that's a future management issue.
Which I think we've already covered that enough in terms of how that will be dealt with as a condition. Okay. Just for my understanding, I've talked about the bird valuations. You'd said county, others say national. How do you differentiate what a value of birds is? How is it? What makes it county? What makes it local? What makes it national?
So the short answer is it's a matter of professional judgment for the
Okay.
ecologist that's doing the assessment. This work wasn't done by me. I'm not the ornithologist. But I've reviewed the work, and my reading of it is that it's been done by a competent ecologist with the right kind of skills and experience to make those judgments. And I haven't seen any other evidence that would refute those levels. It's based on the Chartered Institute of Ecology and Environmental Management Ecological Impact Assessment Guidance, and there are those criteria for the relevant receptors. Important ecological features is what they're called, is set out in those guidelines. They follow those guidelines.
Yeah, we're not disputing.
You're not disputing. Okay.
And
I could clarify that a bit in terms of the British Trust for Ornithology has birds of conservation concern, and it's a rather depressing list, as you can imagine. Things like dunnocks are on it, all sorts of birds, and probably my guess of all the birds that your guys surveyed on there, 40 to 50% are in the red category, are declining and are in desperate straits. Skylarks, all sorts of things. So there are precise definitions.
Absolutely, and I did a very well. A colleague of mine did a very thorough review of all the birds that are recorded on the site and with the spade oak in Appendix A of the rebuttal proof. So that's all set out, and we're not. I think the baseline for birds, with the help of the local recorders, is good, robust.
Understood. Thank you. And it was just a comment that you raised when you were talking, Mr. Seekins, last week at some point. You said the bird surveys were out of date. Obviously, the Appendix A has updated that in the rebuttal from the appellant.
I've seen that, but to be honest, I don't think we'd achieve much by rerunning surveys because we probably know what we're going to get.
Okay.
Is that fair?
I think so. I think it's focusing on management plan and delivering for the bird species that we know that are sensitive.
I think yes. I don't think the surveys are under question at all. They were extensive, well done.
It was just raised.
It was just how it was interpreted. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on birds or species before I move on to nighttime lighting? Okay. So I know the Rule 6 parties are concerned, and Wild Marlow and other people, about the nighttime lighting effect on wildlife, I need to go and do a, well, not just wildlife, but in the context of this ecology session, I will be doing a site visit at night, so I'm going to see the site at night. The rebuttal from the appellants is quite comprehensive on nighttime lighting. Is there anything anybody wishes to add on that, in relation to the points that have been addressed by the appellant and also raised by third parties? I'll go to you first, Mrs. West.
We're whilst it implies sensitive lighting will be there. There is no doubt that going from no lighting to security lighting that will potentially be in operation 24 hours a day or during darkness, there we go, is going to have an impact on bats especially, but also other nocturnal species like the badgers that are on site, the owls, also, you know, all the nighttime species, and however sensitive it is, however many boxes it ticks to say that it's sensitive, it will have a negative impact on there. And there is no lighting there at the moment. Even our little street lights in Westhorpe Park don't run all night. They're only on for a few hours. You know, if you go there at midnight, we're in complete darkness. It's pitch black, which is lovely.
I don't plan on going at midnight. I will do an evening. I will do a visit in the darkness, but I'm not going at midnight.
I see you. I'll probably call the police.
You'll need to report.
Yes. And you know, I just as a side anecdote, and forgive me, but during the summer I'm out at midnight looking for bats, looking for glowworms. I need a head torch, and it is pitch black, and that's the conditions that I need. So there is no doubt that however sensitive the lighting, it will have an impact.
Understood. Thank you. Anything you want to add, Mr. Seekins? No. It's Crabtree.
No. Yeah, I'm not sure if this has happened since the ecological assessments have been done, but it might just be worth noting that the parish council changed the street lighting within the parish, I think about a year ago. So we now have LED street lights, whereas previously we were on halogen bulbs. And part of the assessment for that was that we decided at that point to turn the street lighting off in the village between midnight and 5 AM, I think. So there may actually be even less light in Westhorpe Park during the night time now than there would have been when the ecological assessments were done. That's something we've only just realised.
So one of you.
So I've considered the effects of lighting and noise and general disturbance on wildlife in my rebuttal proof in paragraphs 312 to 316, and my belief is that the impacts of lighting and other disturbance matters are covered well in the impact assessment. There is a commitment for a sensitive lighting design, and there is mention quite rightly of the Institute of Lighting Professionals sensitive lighting for bats in that in the assessment, and I'm sure that will be brought forward in the detail. At that point, I'm going to stop and I'm going to pass over to my colleague because noise and lighting will be dealt with this afternoon.
Well, I think it's only noise being dealt with this afternoon, but Mr. Edmonds is half right in that Mr. Mann, who is the appellant's noise witness,
Has looked at lighting.
has looked at lighting.
Yeah.
So, Madam, I just wanted just some references for you. 5.10 to 5.13 of Mr. Mann's main proof of evidence is on lighting, and then in his rebuttal proof of evidence, 3.8 to 3.14.
Yeah.
So just it may be that you've already looked at those for the next session.
I think I definitely have looked at those for the next session. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
No, don't apologise.
Because we're talking about noise, and unfortunately work commitments mean we can't stay here all day. And could our comments and concerns with regards to lighting, noise, vibration all be taken into account in the next session as well? Unfortunately, we can't represent, but you know, the three go hand in hand with regards to impact on wildlife. So yes, it's you know, a film studio operating 24 hours a day with lots of construction activities as part of their operational activities, which are, you know, and night shooting, blah blah blah. Thank you.
I won't write blah blah.
Yeah.
Etc.
That's the one.
Yes, we've talked about noise, but it's more in the context of residential amenity this afternoon. But
Okay.
I think we've
experience with the Star Wars film studio in the film set in the area. When nighttime filming has to happen, it has to happen because it's expensive. Are the film production companies going to say, oh no, hang on a sec, we can't do nighttime filming because it's bat hibernation season, or it's breeding bird season, or, you know, there are times when it's okay. There are times when it can
it's more
be
sensitive.
very sensitive for wildlife, and birds and bats are different times, and you know, and it doesn't leave many windows open for when it's going to be acceptable with regards to wildlife. So you know, who is going to be carrying out these risk assessments? Is it going, you know, are they going to be consulting an ecologist? Are they going to be, or is it just going to be the film production company saying, we need to do it, let's make it happen? That's a genuine concern, especially with regards to outdoor filming in the backlot, which are the most sensitive areas for wildlife. Lots for 4 and 5.
Yeah, understood.
Thank you.
Any comments on that, Mr. Edmonds or Mr. Fraser?
Just the obvious point. I mean, it's not to. That sounds like I'm being critical of the comment. It's more just the point for you, madam, that the backlot management plan will cover matters such as that.
I appreciate it, for me, even, you know, it's clearly a concern. You've got bat hibernation, you've got bird breeding seasons. The backlot management plan needs to be able to deliver everything, and it is putting a lot onto that. But if the council is satisfied that that can be dealt with by a condition, you are satisfied that you can deal with all these matters by a condition.
Well, yes, combination of the conditions and Section 106 obligations. We're still working through the detail, the fine detail of that. But clearly, these contributions are actually informing that detail. So we'll certainly do our best to make it as meaningful as possible.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Anything else to add on ecology then? I've asked all my questions I wanted to ask.
Sure. I think we've raised all our points. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Nothing from you. Anything from Councillor Crabtree? No. Okay. Right. Thank you. Right. We'll take our morning adjournment. So if we come back in 20 minutes at 25 to 12, and we'll start the noise roundtable then. Is everyone here that needs to do the noise roundtable? Yeah. And yeah, everyone's there from your side. Okay. And there's no interested parties to participate this after for the next session, is there, as far as I'm aware? Okay. Right. So we'll come back at 25 to and we're adjourned until then. Thank you.
Which the rebuttals? These ones. These ones.
That's not the.
Oh, that's a common ground. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
I can join.
Come round and say hello.
Yes.
No, I didn't say hello this morning, which is rather great. So very nice to meet you. Sorry about that. It's very training.
Okay, it's 25 to the inquiry is resumed. Roundtable for noise. Who've I got for the appellant? Mr. Mann, I presume. Hello, nice to meet you. Council, Mr. Goodwell, Mr. Banham, thank you. Rule 6. Councillor Crabtree. Anybody else?
Yes, we've also got Julie Cook, who's our witness from Pinewood.
Okay. Oh, hello, nice to meet you. Right, I won't call you Julie. Mrs. Are you Mrs. or Ms?
Hello. Would you do me a favour, please? I'm
Yes.
hearing impaired. Could you move your mic closer to your mouth, please?
Of course.
Thank you.
Is that better?
It makes a big difference for me. Thank
Good.
you. Would you mind restating what you just said?
I said, are you Miss, Mrs. or Ms?
Ms. MS.
MS. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else participating? Nope. Okay. Have you all got the agenda? I should have asked that before I started the other one. Okay. Right. So policy first is my first item. Obviously this roundtable session refers to reason for refusal 7, which is about residential amenity. That quotes CP9 and DM35. Mr. Fannon, what part of CP9 is relevant in reason for refusal 7? I've not seen it referred to anywhere else apart from the reason for refusal. I'm just looking to understand what's relevant.
Yes, Inspector. Noise is one element of a wider sort of amenity issue, and the reason for refusal 7 covers outlook as well as not as noise, and CP9 is more relevant to the outlook aspect of that reason for refusal. And in terms of noise, the relevant policy is DM35 and then the MPPF appropriate paragraphs.
So CP9's looking whereabouts is it looking at outlook?
Right, you caught me out there. Sorry.
Just for my own understanding.
So part 2 of that policy, requiring development to achieve a high quality of design which contributes positively to placemaking. I think that's sort of the most relevant aspect of CP9.
Okay. But it's not in relation to the noise that we're talking about today. Okay. Anything to add from Rule 6 on that question I've just asked? Okay. Anything from you, Mr. Mann?
No, that's helpful because they were a little confused for me as well as to how they were referenced, but that's it. That was my understanding too.
And inspectors, could I sort of address the pertinent policy issues? Innovations. But clearly, DM35 seeks to prevent significant adverse impacts on the amenities of neighbouring land and property. So that's I think there's a clear relevance there. In relation to the MPPF paragraph 198 in particular, it seeks to ensure that planning decisions ensure that development is appropriate to its location. And that also takes into account the potential sensitivity of the site. So there's a location sort of dimension that must be taken into account. And I think the planning policy guidance gives further, if you like, guidance on this issue that explains that noise is subjective. It's not a simple relationship between the noise levels and the impact of those affected. And we must take into account the existing environment, the conditions of the existing environment. And I think we'll come on to that in part 2 of your agenda. And it all not only does it talk about the existing environment, it also talks about the arrangements of building surfaces and green spaces. And we know in this particular situation, there's a particular nature of building people involved, and we'll come on to that in the next agenda item. It's also worth saying, I think, that the guidance talks about the outside acoustic environment as well as the impact on dwellings, and that's important when we're considering the amenity space that people enjoy around their homes. And it's worth saying that, you know, the relevant guidance in terms of the National Planning Policy Statement for England explains that noise levels will be different for different noise sources, different receptors, and at different times. So a judgment needs to be made about the sort of impact of noise on particular conditions. And also it's worth sort of mentioning at this point that DMRB, that's the Design Manual for Roads and Bridges, talks about the difference between a steady state noise from a road and indeed more proximate noises and how they will be perceived differently and have a different impact.
Thank you. Anything to add, Mr. Mann?
So just in response, you've seen my proof, and I'm particularly keen to establish that the test is from the policy DM 35, which is this significant adverse effect on amenity. And I think we need to be careful about how we interpret that, and making sure that we stick within the guidelines and guidance that I've stated there in my proof.
Understood. Yeah, so we sort of jumped ahead onto framework paragraph there, and other guidance. DM 35 is the relevant policy, which says development is required to prevent significant adverse impact on the amenities of neighbouring land and property. That is the council's adopted policy, and that's the assessment I need to make as primarily section 38.6 having regards to. Yeah, understood. Okay. Anything to add from a Rule 6 perspective? No. So how would you, I'll go to the council then Rule 6 and then the appellant, how would you consider significant adverse impacts to be in terms of an assessment? Because for me, significant adverse impacts is a relatively high bar, and I'm just looking to understand how the council interprets that when you're assessing proposals, and then I'll go to the Rule 6 and the appellant.
I'll allow my colleague, Mr. Bump, to speak. Hold on a second. To come in on the technical aspect of it, but from a planning judgment point of view, like clearly the assessment we have to make is given the existing conditions on site, the nature of the local residential environment, and the introduction of a new noise source.
Just slow down slightly, Mr. Fannin, please. Thank you.
Whether the introduction of this new noise source within 15 meters of those homes, you know, how that will be perceived. We know there's a background noise, a drone of traffic that's, you know, louder, closer to the extremities or the boundaries of the site. But as you know, near the residential homes themselves, it's much more a background noise and not so dominant. So the question is, by introducing a new source of noise associated with something like 1,300 vehicles a day within 15 meters of those dwellings, crossing over a public right of way that they use to access walks or whatever, you know, what's the effect of that going to be? And our judgment is that scale of development, that scale of activity, and the associated noise will be a significant impact on the amenities of those residents.
Mr. Goodwood, anything further to add?
Not sure that mic is on.
If you just try and speak into it so that people
Yeah,
at the back of the room can hear you.
it's quite a subjective area in terms of what Mr. Fannin just picked up on. Is there's sensitivity to certain particular noises, and if you've got a background noise which is established, and then you bring in a new noise source with sensitive receptors, that can have a more significant impact upon those individuals. There's been a lot of work in regard to setting levels of significance as objective definitions, but there's an underlying subjective characteristic to those noise sources, so it's quite hard to define. Mr. Mann set out a good table in his rebuttal in regard to levels from Knowles, Rolls and Soles, which looks at significant impact and also the subjectivity of road traffic noise itself.
Do you want to bring that up for any reason, or
I've
No.
just bring it up is there is within Mr. Mann's report, there is a couple of tables that relate specifically to significant adverse effect levels. And they tend to be ranges rather than definitives, which then goes back to the subjectivity matter of the setting an significant adverse effect level as a singular.
thank you. Anything further to add on that question before I go to the Rule 6? Okay. Any comments, Councillor Crabtree or Mrs. Matt?
Yes, please. I think we noticed on Monday when we did the site visit that areas across the national landscape are noisy, but in this part of the country we are not blessed with places where you can't hear traffic noise. It's fairly accepted across the whole area that there will be noise from the motorways, from the major A roads, and obviously if development goes ahead, from the access road into the centre of this site. But that doesn't mean the national landscape's not beneficial and it's not able to be enjoyed and serving a purpose for local people because it's noisy. There is background drone, as we've discussed already, but I think it should be recognised there's an additional psychological impact for people living with unexpected noise that you can't predict when you're going to hear a door slam or a truck start reversing and beeping, or when there's something that's going to be going on in the back lot that's going to produce intermittent noise that can't be anticipated and expected. In plot 2A, the car park, which has open walls to allow ventilation, is very close to residential dwellings, and there are backlots as well in not backlots, workshops in.
Sorry, what in plot 2A has open walls?
The car park.
The car park,
multi-storey.
multi-storey. Yeah.
Yep. And then behind that there are workshops which will be close to buildings like Thimble Cottage and the Westthorpe Park homes, where one must assume there will be power tools being used, hammering going on, that activity that you would expect with set building and those types of businesses. So I think on a day-to-day basis, the noise that's going to be introduced to this site goes beyond just traffic noise, but is the as we're talking about the qualitative assessment of, is one type of noise different to another? And I think that's something that needs to be weighed up, and that's why I would consider it to be a significant impact for the residents and the residential amenity effect, because it's a different type of noise to the traffic noise we currently experience.
Thank you. Mr. Mann.
See if I can read my notes. Thank you. So just starting then with this point that was made by Mr. Fannin about the steady state noise, that's definitely something that I agree with, that there is a difference between steady state noise and intermittent noise. And that's for the same reason why we have a variety of different standards to look at that and metrics. So for example, we use this metric of LA max as a metric for this intermittent noise that also Councillor Crabtree's talked about, and we consider that in a different way because of its erratic nature to the steady state noise. We've got a few things going on here in terms of noise, in terms of sources, and so in terms of traffic noise, we have some roads that are typical roads, some are lightly trafficked roads where you may have an observable effect on, you know, an actual vehicle passing event, and then we have the other sources of noises that would have been mentioned in terms of construction noise and intermittent noise. And I think we do need to really sort of look at those individually because they all have a different nature. Going back to the noise quality statement for England that was mentioned, that provides this description. Well, that helps us to understand this SOAEL, which is the significant observed effect of adverse effect level, and that's what I'm taking to be interpreted in terms of policy DM35, to prevent significant adverse impacts. And I will, if we can just take you to table 3.1 of my proof, which I was very pleased to hear was a good table from Mr. Goodburn. But if we could have a quick look at that, I think that would be helpful. In the main proof, yes, it's in my main proof, page 13, just after 3.13, if that's helpful. Table 3.1. Do you have?
Sorry, I'm there. Yeah.
Sorry.
I should have said I bring it up and then I just wait and don't say anything.
I was just being polite. So I've only included the LOEL, the lowest observable effect level, and the SOAL, which is the significant, and how these are different. And these are the different criteria in where it says noise level criteria there for different sensitivities, because there is a different sensitivity depending on whether you're outside or whether you're inside and the type of noise. But as you see there's also an LA max criteria there that we've taken from the World Health Organization, and various LEQ, so average noise levels, that we've taken from the sources that we've referred to. That's table 3.1, and I consider that to be the best way to look at absolute levels, and sometimes it's important to be able to have a criteria to work to, especially when you're designing, which is what we've been doing. And then in table 3.2, this is the comparison, and I know Mr. Goodman was talking about comparison with background. That's something different, but in terms of baseline comparison, so if you need me to explain the difference between background and baseline, I can do, but table 3.2 then shows how we can look at that in terms of significance as well. So that's the change from the baseline to what's proposed.
Yeah, so tell me, for the benefit of everybody here, what is the difference between baseline and background?
Okay, so I thought we might get to that. So when we talk about background in noise terms, we are using a term L90, and that looks at the if you like the bottom 10% of noise, because noise changes throughout the day. A vehicle will go past, as you get peaks and troughs throughout the day, and the L90 gives us a background level that represents what's the sort of the general background, if you like. It's difficult to explain.
So it's not, but that's baseline, not background.
No, sorry, I'm talking background. Baseline.
You're talking background. Sorry, I thought you said baseline.
Oh,
was
did I?
L90. Background's L90.
Background L90.
Okay.
And that is used in a variety of standards, including the some of the ones that have been referenced, to compare the effect against that.
Yeah.
Baseline, which is really what we're talking about typically in an EIA style assessment, is where we're saying what is the noise at the moment and how has that changed as a result of the scheme. So they are obviously two very different terms, and the reason why it's important is because I think Mr. Goodman's been talking about background and how there's a change above the background when you have a passing vehicle, which I suspect we'll come to, whereas I consider the SOAL to be this change in baseline in table 3.2.
Okay.
If that helps.
Slightly. It's like a dark art, isn't it?
Sorry, I'll try and do my best. So just then turning to So I think that's key in terms of, I do agree about the subjectivity, but it works both ways. So I would say that this a passing car is less, for example, than a siren going past, irrespective of the noise level, just because of the nature of it and how you can get used to traffic, and that's the reason why traffic noise is looked at as an average level, because it's something that is known that people get used to. And you will have read in my proof the section about from DMRB where it talks about annoyance and percentage annoyance.
Yeah.
Just finishing off on Mr. Goodman's point, I'm really not sure about this distance of 15 meters. So maybe we might need to look at that. The closest noise source to the Westthorpe Park homes is the access road going towards the southern multi-storey car park, if I can call it that. And that is around 40 meters. The back of those.
Yep.
Just to clarify, Inspector, I said 50.
Oh, well, that's not so
yeah,
bad
I
then.
let you off.
But we'll take 40.
Thank you for that. I was getting very worried.
I did think 15 was quite close, and I just thought I'll just let it go and wait, see what happens.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
I'll take 50. So, because there was points raised earlier also about this level, a distance of 28 meters, and how that was actually the back of the buildings, which was a blank noise source. So I was just worried about that, but that's okay. Okay. There's a few points raised by Councillor Crabtree, and they're sort of quite wide. So I don't know if we want to deal with them separately. But
It might be that we pick them up going
Yeah.
forward, because I mean, my question was literally, do you consider significant adverse impact to be a high
Okay,
bar?
I'll
We've sort of all gone off on a tangent.
we've all gone off
But
on a tangent,
that's
yeah.
what happens in round tables. I'm not as bossy as the barrister saying, can you answer my question that I've asked of you? Okay, right. We've talked about the framework. Is there anything else you want to raise about planning policy or guidance before I move on to existing conditions? Yep, Councillor Crabtree.
I'm nervous that it doesn't relate precisely to your question, but
Okay.
whilst we were talking about table 3.1 and Mr. Mann's evidence, I was wondering if I could clarify. There's a difference between internal living spaces and external spaces on that table, and I wondered if that reflected, for example, this fabric of the building and the type of construction of the homes in, for example, Westthorpe Park.
We are coming on to a question about
Okay, all right, I'll hold my thought then. I won't say it again, you can answer it when we get to it.
Okay.
Inspector,
Yes. Mr. Fallon.
just in relation to the DMRB reference.
Yeah.
And traffic be measured at a steady state, but it does recognise that close to a road, individual vehicles can be distinguished from the general background drone. So there is a recognition that there is a distinct difference in perception of near field noise to background.
Okay. Anything to add on that?
No, I mean, in the sense that I don't disagree with that, but that falls into this subjective element that we have to be careful not to confuse with significance.
Okay. So, how would you describe the existing noise environment of the site? And I'll go to the council first on that, please.
And well, we've been on site. I think clearly, as you at the boundary of the site, it's quite noisy. You can hear the traffic from the two major roads. As you get closer to Westthorpe House and Park homes, that drops off, and it's a background noise, and it's less intrusive. So, like, I wouldn't say it's a very quiet environment, but it's a relatively quiet environment in the immediate vicinity of Park homes. And the other consideration is that Park homes in particular, as opposed to Westthorpe House, they're individual prefabricated dwellings, lightweight structures, very small gardens outside space. So I think there's a certain vulnerability associated with the physical nature of those homes in terms of how they're built, the plots. We've also heard some evidence about the people who live there, generally elderly, and maybe considered vulnerable to a degree. Because they have such limited outside space, we can imagine that they benefit greatly from the open environment around them, the public right of way nearby, and the ability to go and walk and enjoy the outside environment. So I think that's the environment we're introducing a new source of noise into, and that's what we need to consider. Thanks.
Councillor Crabtree, or how would you describe, same as the council, or any further comments on how you describe the existing noise environment?
No, I think the council's comments are adequate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mann.
So yes, I mean we hopefully you've seen this on your site visit. The thing I would point out perhaps is that this is not, if we are going to be looking at this subjective element, then we also need to look at the subjective element of the baseline, or what's there at the moment, as you say. And that does include, of course, I agree that you can hear the 404 noise, of course, but that does also include vehicles accessing in and out of the Park Homes part of the site of their area, and refuse vehicles, delivery vehicles, buses, I believe, even haven't witnessed one yet, but there are some HGV passing events, and there are obviously vehicles. It's there's no restriction there in the sense of delivery vehicles or friends, neighbours, whatever coming past. And so if we're going to look at single passing events of HGVs, cars in a subjective nature, then we need to consider that baseline does already exist. The other thing is that the car park for that Westhorpe House, as well as parking areas close, or informal parking areas, I think they are close to the entrance to the Park Home site, are also used. So even in the evenings and early mornings, you will still get vehicles coming in and out as people leave their homes, and that's all part of the existing conditions.
Understood, thank you. So in your proof of evidence, Mr. Mann, at 5.02, you point to figure 2.5 and say that it shows the baseline noise levels are high, with more than half the site having noise levels above 55 decibels LAEQ, and that's considered significant, as that's the upper level recommended in the British Standards for Gardens. So you're saying that shows a relatively high background noise level. The council have said that it's a noisy environment from the major roads, but it drops into the site. Have you got anything further on that, what Mr. Mann says about it being a relatively high background noise level? Or is it going back to that sort of subjective assessment again?
Well, part of this is objective, and it's maybe useful to reference Mr. Mann's coloured contour plans in relation to the noise environment that exists and what it will become. And it's there's 2 points here. Clearly his own assessment, which was undertaken late in the day, not originally with the planning application. It was taken just to support the statement of common ground.
Yeah, understood.
And you'll note that there was also a change in how that study was presented in the context of the council, introducing some text into the draft statement of common ground. Mr. Mann withdrew his first version of his assessment and submitted another one. But clearly, whichever one you look at, it clearly shows that the noise environment on the access road increases significantly by up to 10 decibels. So that's.
So I'm coming on to that, yeah. But it's about the current existing conditions is my question about that it shows that the appellant's saying that it currently shows, based on the baseline noise levels, that it's a relatively high background noise level. Is there anything further you want to add?
Well, only that the modelling that's been undertaken, we've had no input into. It's we don't understand the detail of how that modelling was generated, and we're unsure whether it accurately reflects the the noise level that could be experienced at certain instances of the day or night at those residential properties themselves. Just don't know. So we have to, the judgment we made at the planning decision stage was based on the information we had, and the sort of judgment we can now make in relation to the information that's presented to us. There's a significant increase in noise very close to these dwellings, which is absolutely clear. But what I'm less clear on is what the actual noise experience would be in the dwellings themselves or at a window.
Okay. So are you disputing what the appellants presented in terms of, because you're saying you've had no input into the modelling, you don't know how it was generated. Are you disputing those findings, or?
What I'm questioning is whether this is an appropriate level of detail to fully understand the sensitive nature of the receptors. I suspect it's too crude and broad brush, and this particular situation where you're introducing a very large scale of development with intense level of activity cars into a vulnerable residential population would have warranted a more sensitive approach to understand the actual impact on those residential properties and their residents. But I'm not, I can't dispute the figures Mr. Mann's produced. That's the model he's run. But I'm saying it seems to me to be broad brush, and I'm concerned that it may not fully reflect the reality of the impact on residents. But the judgment we are able to make is in relation to the noise environment very close to those dwellings, the environment that people enjoy as part of their amenity. We do know there's going to be a significant increase in noise level.
Right. Anything to add?
Before Mr. Mann jumps in, just to say, Mr. Fannin will correct us if we're wrong, but we don't think this point has been raised to date as to questioning.
No, that's why I picked it up straight away.
Obviously, it's something that we are quite concerned about, this new point being raised for the first time in the roundtable session orally. Obviously, if to our knowledge, we've never been asked to provide any of the information underpinning the modelling that Mr. Mann has provided. Had we been asked, then of course we would have provided it. Obviously, for you, madam, it's up to you how you proceed. If you want us to go away and provide that information, we can, but obviously that's going to mean an adjournment.
It is.
And it's really, if the council want to maintain this position, then we, in order not to prejudice us, we need to have a fair opportunity to respond. So we are, I'm afraid, quite concerned about this new point on this side of the room.
Mr. Burt.
Adam, as you've heard, we don't challenge the assessment of the existing baseline which has been undertaken.
Okay.
To that, and the council's concern is, as set out Mr. Goodbun's evidence, which is effectively that in terms of the metric used, that doesn't adequately reflect how the noise would actually be perceived. That's the extent of the council's case in relation to that.
Right. So whether it's because what the council said is they were questioning whether an appropriate level of detail, and that they were concerned if the assessment was correct. So
it's limited to that point which Mr. Goodbun has raised.
And
we haven't asked for additional modelling.
No, that's what my understanding was.
I mean, I'm very grateful for Mr. Bird's clarification, because that was my understanding as well, but I'm afraid it doesn't sound consistent with the point that Mr. Fannin just made about calling into question 502. So if Mr. Fannin wants to maintain that position, then we are concerned. But if it's Mr. Bird who's correct, then we're not concerned.
Apologies if I've misled you, but I concur with Mr. Bird's clarification.
Thank you. Right. Okay.
Would it help if I explained what we've done and some of the points that were raised in terms of the modelling work?
Would it help? I think it might help me a little bit, but
I'm sure it would help everybody, madam, if Mr. Mann explains what he's done and perhaps how the model was constructed, certainly in relation to the multi-storey car park would also help, I think.
Yes, I can do that. So all of the modelling work that we've done has been based on the traffic flows from the environmental statement. You'll see in my proof that unfortunately the internal access roads were not modelled or predicted in the application documents. And so we were sort of at a point where we needed to come up with an understanding of the noise impact of the internal access roads to respond to the reason for refusal number 7. That's the primary reason for doing the modelling, is to add that extra information in and compare that so that we all have that together. The modelling is detailed, all of the heights and building volumes and traffic flows and height points as contours in terms of the height, so are all included in that model. In terms of the effect of vehicle noise, those have been put in terms of flows. However, those were that still was something that we were discussing with Mr. Dix throughout this process, and so that is one of the reasons why there is a slight change between the November the November statement of common grounds and the December statement of common grounds, because we were looking at that. The other question that's been raised it is, why did we has it been detailed enough? So because that point was made, that's by Mr. Goodbun, I've provided, which is unusual, but I've provided even more detail from the modelling in the rebuttal. So when you look at Appendix A of my rebuttal, and I do apologise, there's an awful lot of numbers in there, but then I didn't really want to be said that we hadn't provided enough detail. So that's why I've sent them all in there. Basically, for every receptor, we are looking at a passing vehicle, a passing HGV. How much noise would a passing HGV increase, looking at it on an hourly basis, but also LMAX in the rebuttal as well. So all of that information has been provided, and that's in response to the concerns that were raised. The multi-storey car park, we with all of our noise sources, so there are, it's not just traffic in there, there is noise from plant, there is noise from the backplot, there are noise from, as we've heard, tools and things. They're all in there, but in terms of the car park, what we do is we verify noise from a car park to an existing car park of similar design. So we've gone back, we've used measurements that we've taken of a similar design car park with the openings. I don't know how to describe, but yeah, an open car park, shall we say, and we've used those noise levels to put into the model to represent, because it's a fairly complex situation of, you've got noise inside, and then as you go up the levels, and you've got reflections from the roof and the walls. So that's what we've put into the modelling, and all of that comes into the big tables, if you like, in the that are in the statement of common ground. I don't know if that helps.
It helps me. Does that help you understand, Mr. Goodbun?
It does. Can I just have one query in relation to the modelling? And this is figure 4, table 4, column B, which is in the statement of common ground, noise statement of common ground.
Sorry, which version?
In the December.
December, thank you.
Yeah, Appendix E. Yeah. Page 10. And again, it's just for clarification in terms of what was modelled. We can see in relation to the multi-storey car park where that is in relation to the site, and we have the 55 to 64 dB running along what is the line of the footpath to the north, and also the line of the access road to the south. And
which one are you on? Figure?
This is figure 4, is
Figure
it?
Figure 4, yes.
Page 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on there. Yeah, okay, got it.
Yeah, something like to visually. You can, if you can't see, but in terms, you can see the 55 to 64 dB goes both to the north and to the south. of the multi-storey car park, which is accessed from the south. So it was just what assumption is in the model in terms of
Yes, so
what is
each of those,
generating, what effectively, what is generating the 55 to 64 dB north of the car park?
yes, so we all of these internal roads, so you see there's a, let's just call it an orange bit, to the south and to the north of the car park and along the internal access road. This is what you're looking at, figure 4, is the existing baseline noise levels as well as the internal access road. So wherever we've assumed previously that there is some flows, they will also be on there. I will admit that the one to the north we put in as an extra. We weren't sure how it was being accessed, so we've actually doubled up there.
That was the point.
Yes, yeah.
Because I don't think it is an access road.
It's an access. It's just part of the access road. So we have the same flows on both of those.
That's helpful.
Okay. Right, I think we've done existing conditions then. So vehicle noise, and we've sort of moved on again to Appendix E already. It's okay. This is what happens in roundtables. You just sort of bounce around until you've answered all the questions. Okay. 2.2 in the council's proof of evidence, Mr. Goodburn, you say that the supporting documentation for the proposed development speaks to predicted and/or modelled increases to unwelcome noise, which may have a negative impact upon amenity of residential noise-sensitive receptors, as well as impacting adjacent commercial entities. I just didn't really understand what you were referring to specifically on that.
It's in relation to the vehicle movements specifically generated by the development and their impacts, having a significant impact upon the amenity of those either residential receptors or the commercial receptor at the far bottom of back lot.
What are the commercial receptors then?
There's a big hotel complex.
Oh, it's the hotel?
Yeah.
Okay. Understood. Right. Okay. Thank you. And then you say at 2.3 that the noise would be from a mixture of significant number of vehicles accessing and traversing the site at peak times, as well as more periodic vehicle movements. This intermittency linked with the significantly closer proximity to the noise sources would result in a greater negative impact upon amenity as opposed to a background hum. Have you got any evidence about the intermittency and that link with the significantly closer proximity? So what evidence have you got that backs up that statement, or is it just your own professional judgment?
In part, it's my own professional judgment. I agree with comments made by Mr. Mann again in terms of you've got the existing background hub of the A404M and the A415. But introducing this development would then bring a closer near-field sound source that would have its own peak and off-peak flow rate, which has been explored, I believe, in the highway section, and modelling has been done based on that in terms of there's an ingress for peak flow times and then you've got quieter times, but that would be in the near field adjacent to noise sensitive receptors, therefore more readily noticeable, would have a more significant impact or a greater impact on those areas, as with more transcendental individual movements of HGVs, delivery trucks going through site as well. So it's making a distinct comparison between the background noise that's coming from the existing road infrastructure to the introduction of near field noise sources.
Okay. But there isn't any specific evidence that you've got that that's going to create an adverse impact. It's just your judgment based on the evidence that you've got before you.
It goes to some of the modelling provided by the appellant in terms of the internal access roads have a defined level within them, and also that the built development itself will provide a degree of shielding from the existing noise sources. So effectively the background noise so try use words, the noise from the A404M will be slightly decreased because of the shielding provided by the built infrastructure.
Okay. Anything to add, Mr. Mann, on that question I've just asked?
Yes, so just starting with the first one that you asked.
Sorry, I didn't come back to you. It was more for my clarification. I didn't know you wanted to respond on that.
I just wanted to add that obviously negative effects and unwelcome effects are not terms that are defined. So I don't agree that we should be using those terms to determine significance. We may need to go back to Mr. Dix on this point, but our understanding is that HGVs in particular, we're talking about 1 or 2 a day at the very most during the busy periods, and that's going along that diagonal internal access road. And then we've assumed that it then goes all the way around down to the back lot as well. And that's what we've put in our model. So the contribution from a passing HGV in terms of average noise levels is very small. However, when we look at Appendix A of the rebuttal, that's where I have presented the difference between the background, so that's the L90, as in the measured background, so pre-development, with that passing HGV, and the increases are very small, and you can look through those numbers, but we are most of the time there is no increase, and the maximum is I think around 5 or 10. So this is why when we start looking at the subjective element rather than the average noise levels, which are defined in terms of significance, when we looked at the subjective, we are still comparing that to a passing bin truck or a passing car, and every passing car, if somebody's going to go and visit their neighbour, that will still have a 10 to 15 dB increase as it goes past. So it's of that same order of magnitude as you'd expect.
Thank you. Did you have something on the second point, or Mr. Fraser? You've put. Okay.
I think I was merging both points together.
Okay.
Could I just pick up one thing that Mr. Goodbun mentioned about I think he described it as the shielding of the background noise, the existing background noise by the development. And so he made the point that the background noise will decrease as a result of the built form comprising the development. And that's something that the appellant relies on as well, because of course that shielding by the development should be seen.
Just one of you turn your mics off. There's a feedback going on, please. Thank you.
Sorry, I could hear that as well, but I didn't have the wherewithal to work out where it was coming from. So the point simply is that the fact that the scheme is going to have that positive benefit in terms of shielding background noise levels from the road should be taken into account in the overall picture of the effect of the development on the noise levels in terms of residential amenity. And I think I inferred from Mr. Goodbun that he was seeking to say, well, given that the built form is going to be there and it's going to be shielding, so the baseline levels decrease, that's the baseline against which you then need to assess the impacts of the scheme. But obviously we would say that actually the shielding is something that needs to be factored into the overall assessment. I don't know if Mr. Mann wants to comment on that particular point.
Yes, without wanting to say we want it both ways, the shielding effect is definitely a positive element. Will that be perceived? Possibly not significantly perceived. It's the maximum shielding event is 3 dB, which would not necessarily change that background either. So
sorry, the maximum shielding event is 3 dB.
Yes, so if we want to just look at that, we can turn to the appendix E of the statement of common ground.
Mine's on, but I'll just leave mine on. So thanks.
Ironic and a noise round table.
Whereabouts in Appendix E did you want me to go?
Sorry, table 4.
Predicted average noise levels.
Yes.
Yep.
So here we have, and I couldn't think of any other better way other than to put them all in here. Here we have the different scenarios from the modelling. So we've got the baseline, then we've got, I split out the noise from the access roads and the other noise, which is all the backlot and the plant and all that. But if we look at the two last columns, column F and column G, this is the, effectively, this is the contribution from the scheme at each one of those receptors. And if we just look at, if we're just talking about traffic at the moment, we look at column G, you can see that with the exception of a few 0.1s, all of them have got a reduction. That reduction is the shielding effect, essentially, because this is the overall contribution. So even though we've added in some traffic, the resulting overall is a reduction. And I think the most there is, well, actually there's a 3.5, a receptor S.
Where's that? Sorry, receptor S.
Receptor S, column G.
Is that not a betterment because it's in green?
It is a better. That's what I'm saying. It's a
sorry, that is a
reduction.
better. Right.
So the reduction of the shielding effect is 3
So the ones that are negative, that have a worsened effect, shall we say, are the ones that are in red, and that's like 0.1, 0.1,
Yes.
0.1.
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
0.3 is it? So the worst one that you've predicted is G. In column G is receptor AA, which is over the page at 0.3. Is that my understanding?
Yes, but we just have to be careful because I think we've got footpaths and ecological receptors is
in there, right? Okay.
Is AA.
What page is the receptor on? Is it a bit
If you
further
turn a few pages
forward?
No, apologies, that is 11 Woodside Gardens, so that's in Little towards Little Marlow.
All right, got it. Yeah.
The list of receptors is table.
Figure 2.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't have got them all onto one page. So yeah, table 1.
So figure 1 and figure 2. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So yes, the overall maximum contribution from the access roads, including going down to the backlot, is the 0.1 at.
So just tell me how receptor AA has a 0.3 when it's not even on site.
So receptor AA is close to that. Is close to the.
So that's on the other side of the junction near the fire station, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yes. So this includes all of the traffic flows onto the network.
So it's in right. Okay. So because I thought access roads only would be the access road through the site.
And and everything going.
You mean access roads to the site, so including roads around
going up to the red line boundary.
Okay.
Yeah. So AA is across the road, but you actually get a contribution from that one in the top corner by the car park.
Right. Okay.
So the contribution
It doesn't seem to make sense that the worst affected receptor is from the
No,
access roads, isn't even on the site.
I did look
or near the site,
and it's actually
it's near the site, but
yes, it is. I did double check.
Okay. Thank
because
you.
the biggest contribution. So this is just the noise from the
access road.
The access roads on the site. Maybe we should just have a look at the plan actually, because I think
that's fine.
That's helpful to show. So if we turn to figure 9, which is the graphical output of column G that we're looking at.
Yeah.
So if you look at the yellow blob, then you can see that that's actually where the biggest change is, up in that corner, and so that's why you get that receptor across the across there as.
And I
as
presume that's
being
assuming because most vehicles are going to come onto the site at that point and go on the multi-storey northern car park
right.
or into the site itself.
Exactly. That it reduces a lot after the northern multi-storey car
Right.
park.
That does make sense now. You showed me a picture of it. So clearly my brain works different ways.
It's all right.
Uh,
We get there.
Councillor Crabtree.
Yeah, thank you. So I was going to just perhaps ask if Julie could give a quick comment on the number of HGVs that generally come in and out of a film studio, because we were quite shocked to hear that only 1 or 2 HGVs have been modelled per day coming in and out on this model.
I don't think he was, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I think it was going to the back lot. Is that correct?
Through
Rather
the
than
access road.
Through the access
Yeah.
road to the back lot
Okay.
rather than actually onto the site
Okay.
itself.
All right. Yeah, that's fine. And in terms of the noise receptors at F and S, which would be houses like Moat House or Stallworthy, as it's called, or Thimble Cottage, I think it's really interesting on table 4 that they're showing us having less noise afterwards. So I think this table completely neglects to mention the noise generated within the actual operation of the studio itself. The fact that, you know, obviously the workshops will generate noise, but I can't see how that's modelled in this table.
Mr. Mann.
So let's perhaps look at figure 8 now. So this is the contribution from. So this is column F now. So this now includes not just the access roads, but also the backlot noise, everything. And so if we look at the contribution here, you can see quite a lot of, let's just call them red blobs. And that is where those those local backlots are located. So we've got noise from angle grinders and all the rest of it happening in there together with the backlot. So when you look at the contribution from all of those, bearing in mind that within the studios, these are highly insulated buildings, so there's really very little other than the air conditioning and the air handling plant, which are also included, actually coming from the studios themselves. It's actually these, if you look at the red blobs, it's actually the external sort of, well, they call them backlot areas, but they're, what do we call them? Yeah, circulation areas, and where they do temporary things outside. That's the biggest contributor of noise, where those red blobs are, and that's why, well, by the time you get over to some of the other receptors that were being mentioned, the shielding effect is counterbalancing.
Okay, so figure 8 shows everything and the effect.
The contribution from everything.
The contribution from
the
everything.
change plot.
And figure 9 is just the base, the access roads.
Correct.
So access roads is what the council took issue with and the reason for refusal, but you didn't take issue with the operational side of it at all. That is correct on my understanding of what the council's case is. Yeah. Okay. I know the Rule 6 case is very different to that. So
yep.
Do you understand the difference between figure 8 and figure 9 that Mr. Mann's just explained?
Yes, I think so. I mean, looking at figure 8, I'm confused how there's noise generated in plot 5 in the backlot, but apparently there's going to be less noise at Westhorpe Park because none of the noise is going to travel from the backlot to Westhorpe Park. And I don't see how that's shielded by any development changes between where plot 5 is and Westhorpe Park is. I mean, I can only speak anecdotally. Living a few hundred meters away from where the Star Wars backlot was, I could regularly hear hammering in my back garden. You know, these kind of noises do travel hundreds of meters across the landscape. So I don't know why there is not more impact coming from that backlot orange blob that you mentioned, because I don't think there's any additional shielding between there and the resident.
Okay, I'll try and explain this. So
please do.
So this is a contribution, a difference between the with and without scenario, if we want to think of it in that terms. So the shielding effect is pretty ubiquitous across the whole area, which is why you see all this green. That's where the change is. It's not huge because it's this light green between 0 and 3. Now we're dealing with this particular plot as opposed to some of my other tables, are dealing with average noise levels over 16 hours. And so, yes, there's a completely different situation here between noise, that this impulsive noise or occasional noise, which is what the local authority are also mentioning. And so I'm not suggesting that if an HEV goes past the homes that won't be audible. But when you look at that in the context of that whole average, which is the standard that we work to for traffic noise, then that's why we see these slight changes here as a result of the shielding becoming more dominant than the actual contribution overall.
Okay, can I just ask a clarification on that? So if I understand correctly, you're saying that, for example, at Westhorpe Park, they will have lower baseline steady state traffic noise on a day-to-day basis, but they will have more intermittent noise, which overall leads to a reduction in the average noise.
I think you've got it.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Do you want to say that again so I can make an accurate note of what you just said?
Sorry. So saying at Westhorpe Park,
yeah, they have a lower
the
background noise.
Steady state noise will be slightly shielded. So they're what I call the background drone of the road noise will go down.
Yes.
Due to the shielding. But the intermittent noise, which I would say is more problematic psychologically, more damaging to residential amenity, and the council have referred to this as well, the intermittent noise will go up.
But overall,
the average amount of noise recorded on the site will be less, and that's why it's green. But there will be less background drone and more intermittent noise.
Yeah, that
is correct. Yeah. But then I quantify that intermittent noise in Appendix A of the rebuttal so that we can see.
Yeah, you can see the LA.
You can
LA
see where
max
that
points.
Yes.
But that only refers to
passing
traffic. It doesn't refer to events that might happen on site, like, I don't know, a drill on the back lot or something like that, or an angle grinder, or because that's not that
right.
table A is only referring to
correct
traffic noise.
Yes.
Okay.
So going back to figure 8, we've put the average noise levels in for all of that.
Yeah.
And of course, during construction, the average noise is almost the same as the intermittent noise because it's happening all the time. So we can still use that as a good indication of what's going on in that backlot. But I think we're starting to go towards backlot issues now.
Oh no, I understand. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Right. I think that helps me. Anything else to raise on that point that we've just been, Mr. Goodwin?
It relates back to the Rule 6 comment. Is there is an overall reduction in noise from the A404M, which then increases the significance of the near field noise sources. In part, the Rule 6 has also looked at some of the issues in regard to the averaging that I've mentioned in my rebuttal. Again, I recognise it's an agreed standard. I don't challenge that in any way, shape or form, but some of that detail can be lost. So again, it looks at those level differences, and they are more significant in regard to the fact that the background level has dropped due to the shielding effect of the built environment. And our particular reference, the access road.
Okay.
Just
give me one sec.
Okay.
If I don't spell check it now, I'll never be able to read it when I get back to it. So, Mr. Mann.
Just on that point, I think we do have to be careful here, because there is a difference between the baseline, my modelled baseline, and what's happening in reality. So you will get, as I stated earlier, you will get noise from occupiers' own vehicles within their own gardens, from themselves, from their neighbours. None of that has really been included. So when we start to talk about a 3 dB change in overall levels, we just have to be careful to put that into context of how things change. What I have done is I have included, I keep saying, but in Appendix A there is a lot of information there to help us to see how those changes. And even if we,
Do you want to take me to anything in Appendix A to point out?
should we have a look at that?
What you're saying?
Yeah. Now, I do apologise, it's quite a lot of numbers.
It is, yeah.
So if I can just try and familiarise of how it's laid out. So for each receptor, so we've got A, B, C, D, E, and what have you. So we've got 4 lines for each receptor. And then this is spread out across the long ways across the whole duration of the day.
Yep.
So you can see, just for everybody's benefit, it goes from midnight to midnight. And this was because there was a concern raised about vehicle pass-by events in evenings and that sort of thing. What we've then done is you can see where we say survey position. So you've got U2, U1, U4, for example. That relates to the submitted noise, the survey that was done as part of the submitted noise assessment. So we've taken the noise levels from their survey across each hour of the day to give us a background.
Yep.
And that, so the first line there where we say existing L90, that is from that survey data.
It's
and
from U2
that,
survey
that,
position.
that's from the U2 survey, and that is the existing background. So you can see it's sort of 32 and then goes up to 38 in the day.
Yeah.
Similar to the other locations, some of them are closer to roads, so they change that. So that's the survey data that's been used. Then the predicted LAQ, that's the average noise level. That is synonymous with the contour plots that we've been looking at.
Yeah.
We then,
and that's taken from the traffic modelling that Mr. Dix's team have done in the environmental statement.
All of the traffic modelling in the environmental statement has been included in all of the noise modelling, but with some extra stuff for the internal roads that weren't there previously in the environmental statement.
Yeah, understood.
So yes, all that is included. Then the next line we show is existing and predicted, because this is then adding our predicted LAQ to what's there at the moment. And for those of you that are not familiar, noise is logarithmic, so sometimes you can add 30 and 32 together and you get 33. So just be aware if you are actually looking at if you look at the numbers. And then I've given a line called pseudo 4142, and Mr. Goodman knows what that means. but this is where we just look at the difference between the L90 and the predicted LAQ. So here we have the background, here we have the predicted noise levels. What is the difference between the two? Now the top row is probably not a very good example, because there is well, maybe if we look at maybe 11 o'clock in the morning, you've got 14 dB there from the predicted LAQ. Can you see that? Yeah. And then the measured is 38, and so the difference there is, it's not very well clear, but it's actually minus 23.5.
Okay, and that's because of the shielding effect.
No. So this is this is what's the difference between what's there been measured before,
yep, and
what's predicted. So not baseline, background,
right, okay.
Sorry, I know it's the
it.
Reason why we've done this is to try and quantify these passing vehicles and these short-term events, and then also how does that compare with it being quieter in the night time or in the evening or the morning. So you can see those, and in fact the key point here is that they are nearly all less. And they're all less by some degree, even just scanning through, I think, receptor I, which is one of the park homes. If we want to just have a look at that one, I think that's one of the worst affected. If we look at receptor I, which is on the next page, you can see that that the change is -4, whatever, 4.5 during the day, and goes up to -2.9, for example, at, apologies, whatever that is, 6 o'clock in the evening. And so you can see how that changes throughout the day. All of this is against that current measured baseline. So if you were to put the 3 dB reduction from the shielding event, the shielding effect on top of this, then these numbers would change by 3 dB. So you would still, they would go up in this case because it's a difference. I might have lost you, I think, but
slightly. It's all right. I'm trying to get there.
It'll go up by 3 dB. So what I'm saying is it'll still be below the background.
Okay. I think I understand. Councillor Crabtree, you're.
Sorry.
We did refer to it on site as a dark art. It's definitely a dark art. From what I can gauge, though, from what you're saying on these are like the intermittent events. This is what Appendix A is looking at.
Yes.
Okay. Have you got any comments, Mr. Goodbun, from a noise perspective on the other side of the table?
It would have been useful in this table to have the shielding effect separate.
I realise that now, but that would have doubled the size of the table.
Yeah, but there's enough numbers. And again, it's a tricky situation because it's that 3D shielding effect that's been arrived at. Is how's that been determined, and would it vary across different areas of the site? I would expect it to, personally. And again, it goes to noise sources being closer as passing events. Having the additional detail from my point of view is useful, although possibly confusing. But I do agree that there is benefit to the shielding effect of the built environment. The point the council wishes to make is that you've got a closer noise source, and the average data doesn't necessarily equate to some of the metrics that would be observed on site. Therefore, we feel it's a significant negative impact.
But do you presumably had a chance to look at Appendix A?
I have looked at Appendix A.
And have you, because that's obviously dealing with the intermittent events, have you got objections to that? Do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that?
I could say all of the noise measurements conducted in regard to this in terms of the background level calculations, I would challenge.
You wouldn't challenge?
No. I would just look at some of the issues around the objectivity of it in regards to the subjective landscape when we arrive on site. And if you've got for example, the example Mr. Mann's used already is a passing bin truck. If it's your bin truck, that's different to the waste contractors, for example, for a large studio complex. And again,
it's back to that
subjectivity versus objectivity, and that's not easy to distinguish and define.
Okay.
But again, it's looking at the nature and context of the built environment and shielding effects in terms of how it would be perceived on the ground.
But the actual evidence I've got before me that refers to these intermittent events that the council's talking about and the Rule 6 part is talking about, and how that affects the averages and the adverse effects and all that's been put into the assessments, that all shows doesn't show a negative effect. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Right.
Inspector.
Yeah.
I would say just in relation to the graphics, either figure 8 or figure 9, you'll see that there's an increase of greater than or equal to 5 decibels from the access road closest to the park homes. It's been mentioned that this is a logarithmic scale. Like 10 decibels is huge. It's a doubling of sound.
Yeah, I'm coming to that at some point somewhere. I've got that down, but yeah. I'll come back to you on that one, because I think that's been picked up in a rebuttal as well. Okay. Right.
Can I just?
Yes, please.
I've still got figure 8 in my hand, so I thought I'll just use that. So in terms of the +5, yes, but that is within the site. By the time you get to the park homes, they're in the reduction area. The only part that is outside the red line boundary of the site is immediately next to the back lot, but there's no residential receptors at that point.
Anything further on that? We might as well go there. We've already just gone.
No, not disputing that. I'm making the point that we know that this part you say to in the site, but it's a shared access road. It's also crosses the public right of way. It's part of the local environment of that community, and we know there'll be an up to a doubling of noise in that area.
Anything further to add?
So that's where I then come back to table 2.1 of my, table 3.2 of my proof, which is the Knowles and Sowells.
Yeah.
And so actually, in terms of where the residents are, even on the figure 8, you can zoom in and you can see that they're not receiving a change in noise levels. So these are the sort of EIA related change in noise levels that are within above the Sowell.
And you've set those, what table was it again?
Table 3.2 of my proof.
Yeah, just wanted to get that.
Just on footpaths, we have included footpath receptors, so you can see where the effect of the noise on the footpaths are, and they are receptors. Sorry, I will just double check. They are, if we go back to that receptor description, which is table 1 of the statement of common grounds. So AC, AD are the footpaths. And then if we can use the table to help us to then look at what the effect is on the footpaths. So if we go to, let's just take AC, which is it's the sort of east-west one. You can see that there is actually still an overall reduction. So although there is a contribution, obviously, from the access road, there's still an overall reduction at that footpath receptor. I don't know if you're still with me. AC column G.
I'm not, no.
Sorry. Sorry. So I'll just take it slightly slower then. So table 1 tells us where it is the description of the receptors.
Yep, got you. Right, I'm there. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So
I've lost my statement of common ground in a
that's all right.
mass of PDFs.
That's why I printed them out. I knew I'd get lost. So AC and AD are the 2 footpath receptors that we've looked at.
Yeah.
And they're worst case. They're right next to the footpath. And then if we then turn to table 4, we can see that AC and AD do still have an overall reduction, albeit AD is only a little bit, 0.3. column G, sorry, column G.
Yeah. So AC and AD, that's only from the access road. Everything in column F.
Yes, everything in column F is a 1 dB increase on that footpath. Yes.
Okay.
Just to say that those two receptor points are the extreme points of the footpath,
Right.
and not
They're not in the
area-
middle of the
not the
footpath.
area where these graphics.
I mean, I can see from the graphics
You can
on
see where-
figure 8
Yeah.
that where the footpath runs between the studio hub and the multi-story car park on the office buildings. There's a +5 dB increase on that. I can see that. So
Yeah,
that's
and we can also look at the contour plots to see everywhere else in between that we're interested in.
Yeah. Understood.
It's greater than or equal to +5. No, it's between 5.
5 and 10. Yeah. Thank you for the maths.
Could I just ask Mr. Mann, just in terms of comparing the sensitivity of receptors, this was something that Mr. Smith talked about yesterday in terms of impacts on outlook and the difference between the sensitivity of receptors in terms of local residents in their houses, in their gardens versus individuals walking on the public right of way or people driving down the access road. Mr. Mann, in terms of noise impacts and the sensitivity of receptors, is there anything you want to say about the comparative sensitivity that I've just discussed?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've included all of the receptors, including the ecological ones, not wanting to go back to this morning. But it is again subjective, as noise always is. But if you're traveling along a footpath and you yourself are a transient receptor and not there all the time. So the significance for residential dwellings is that you may be there all of the time, and so you will be exposed to all noise that comes over. But the sensitivity of a footpath is important for recreation, well-being, and all those things that we've talked about. But in terms of noise, it is a lower sensitivity because of that transient nature.
Understood. Is that's agreed with the council? Understand that, and I understand that point.
Yes, although as Mr. Fannin pointed out here, you do have the particular context of the use of those public rights of way by particularly the immediately local residents, given the nature of their accommodation. So there is a relationship. Heard from a number of those residents already.
Okay, understood. Anything further to add?
You know, we won't like to hear this, but there's a whole branch of science called psychoacoustics. We are veering into that. Let's not, if we can avoid it. But it is about perception. I totally agree that everybody will have a different perception, and everybody will have a different view of how, for example, a passing vehicle will affect them. I would just try and steer us back to the policy. So on.
Understood. Thank you. Yes. Right. We are at 1 o'clock, so I'm going to suggest we take lunch because I've still got quite a few more questions. So it gives me a chance to work through what I've asked and what I've not asked as well, and what's been answered. So if we come back at 2 o'clock, and anything you want to raise before we go for lunch?
Have we finished vehicle noise?
No, not really. No, there's a few more bits and pieces I need to pick up. Yeah. No, we're not. But we could have answered some of them because I have loads of questions here, and it might be that it's all been answered as I've gone along, so I need to reread them. So okay, right. We'll come back at 2 p.m. Thank you.